Well, hello. This is Nicole Ringgold. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a mountain scene using between 4 and 5 sheets of silver that are soldered together and textured. And you can choose to turn your scene into a ring or keep it flat to use as a pendant. I will walk you through the entire process of drawing, sawing, soldering, and then finally forming the piece into a ring. I will use 22 gauge dead soft sterling silver sheet as well as 22 gauge brass. I refer to my international ring size chart to make sure that I have the appropriate size for my ring. You can download this from Rio Grande or anywhere online. Here's the sheet. I'm going to use a Sharpie to draw a line, kind of like a mountain range, all the way across the sheet. I will then saw along that line, but first I want the appropriate size blade. So if you look down, there's 22 gauge sheet and the range is 3/0 to 5/0 saw blade. My go-to saw blade size for 22 gauge sheet is usually 3/0. Waxing the blade, and now I'm sawing along the line. Once I've sawed all the way through, I take the bottom layer and flip it and turn it, and that will actually create the top layer of the mountain range. If you want to add another layer on the front, like rolling hills, you can do the same process. Once that's sawed out, this is what it will look like. Bottom layer, next layer, and then here are the rolling hills. And of course, these are going to be attached to a back plate. Now I'll take my scrap piece of brass and I'll put it in the disc cutter. I like to use a flange to make sure that the circle or the disc that I cut out is nice and round. Tighten it up and then use a pretty heavy hammer to cut out the disc. I want it to look like my moon is setting behind the mountain range, so I'm putting it alongside the mountains. I'm outlining the mountain scene and going to saw that out so that it tucks perfectly along the ridge. Then once I have everything sawed out, I'm going to anneal. And remember from my previous videos, you'll turn on your torch to the regular soldering flame and then add propane, and that's your annealing flame. And then as you're heating your piece, it's when you pull away and your piece is black that you know it is adequately annealed. If you're confused about the Little Smith torch and how to use it, I have another tutorial on my feed that walks you through the entire process, so be sure to visit that. Place all of the annealed pieces into the pickle so that they turn white, and then you'll also want to anneal the back plate for the ring. Take all of your pieces and turn them upside down, and then you can use really any kind of solder, but I'm using medium solder. I'm going to flux and I'm going to sweat medium solder to each of these pieces. So here I'm fluxing. It's called Mighty Flux, M-Y, like my T flux. And then I will place the medium solder again on the back side of the images. You'll heat the sheet sufficiently so that the solder puddles You don't want it to just ball. If it balls, that means that you've not heated your sheet sufficiently. Get it nice and warm, and then you'll see that the solder puddles. This is called sweat soldering. Once all of the solder puddles, you'll take each piece and once again put it in the pickle. When I solder layers together, I like to be able to access the pieces from below. So I use the Lion Punch Board titanium quads, and I put the first two pieces together, flux both the top and the bottom. I like to flux everything my torch touches so that I can watch the colors of the silver change as I'm heating it. Of course, you're going to want to make sure that the solder that you sweat onto that upper layer is actually facing down now, in between the two layers. I'm adjusting my torch here, making sure that it's warm enough. So I've got about 4 inches of propane. Now I'm adding the oxygen. And I'm going to heat the top and the bottom, but primarily from below, to coax the silver from the top layer down to the bottom layer. As I'm heating the entire mass, I'm watching for the colors to shift. So there's that slight yellow hue. I don't know if you can see that very clearly. That means solder flow point. So I'm coming to the top to make sure that everything is sufficiently heated, going to the bottom and watching for the solder to flow. I diagnose a lot of my work by watching the color of the silver. So gray means dirty or brittle. White means annealed, pickled. Yellow, solder flow point, which you can still see there. Black, no more flux, it's oxidized. And then there's the little gel type spots. That means that's still quite a bit of flux right there. Pickle your piece, quench it, add the next layer, flux, top, bottom, everything that your torch is going to touch. Because if you don't flux everything, when you heat, your piece will just turn black, and it's really difficult then to understand solder flow point. So because I've added another layer here, that means I'm going to need even more heat, more propane to start with. And again, I'm using my pick here to make sure that the piece doesn't jump around. And then when the flux foams, I can remove my pick. Heating primarily from below, watching the color. Once you see that yellow, that means solder flow point. I've added the last layer and the moon, and I can do both of these at the same time. I'll need to increase the temperature in my torch because I've added more mass. It wasn't hot enough. Waiting for that yellow that will show me that it is solder flow point. Now I will pickle, quench, and dry off my piece. Then go over to my flex shaft where this is a small cross-cut cylinder burr, and I use this to do quite a bit of carving. And as long as your piece is annealed and soft, you can start carving into the mountain range. In the back mountains that I think of as more scraggly, rocky, I'm going to dig my edge, the edge of the silicone burr into the sheet. Drawing, carving, I should make note that before I started this process, I cleaned off my workbench because I always collect the dust, the silver dust that I create when I'm carving. For the rolling hills, I use a smaller crosscut cylinder burr and basically scribble in a straight line horizontally across the piece. I use a black silicone disc. This one is from Rio Grande, and you'll see the product number there. I use this to soften the edges of what I have sawed out and to try to take out anything that might feel uncomfortable when the ring is worn. After this, I'll wash it off. And then I dip it in water, and I'm going to add some silver dust into the sky. Dip the piece in water. You don't want to layer the silver dust too thick because otherwise it will just flake off. Doing it on both sides all the way out to the edges of the sheet. I'm using the tie quads, again from Lion Punch Forge, titanium quads. Heating from below. Here you'll see the silver dust go from silver, and then it's going to turn yellow and then like a really gorgeous copper gold color. And then once it turns black, I'll bring my torch up to the top, and I'll work in micro circles until I see the dust fuse. It'll slump down into the back sheet, into the back plate. But I work in micro circles as I'm watching that happen. Then, as always, I pickle, quench, dry my piece off. Then I use a carbide cone burr. This one has red tape, meaning it's not as abrasive as the blue one. I'm going to file down or shave down the edges of the sheet so that it looks like one sheet versus 4 layers coming together. I use a nice sturdy nylon mallet to form the ring around my mandrel. And then here I'm annealing my piece, and then I'm going to paint on the liver of sulfur. I leave my liver of sulfur at room temperature so that it lasts much longer. It lasts about a week. And then when you heat the piece, you don't have to heat it super hot. You just anneal it. It'll turn black. I use this sunburst radial disc chart. I'll use this red one to refer to the radial disc that I want to use to take off some of that liver of sulfur to shine it up. Finish polishing it up, and then I wash with mild soap and water. And yeah, call it good. that's it. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to comment or ask questions below. Thank you.